All right, the Senate is engaged in what has become known as a VoteARama. And as the Senate takes up a budget reconciliation measure, which allows for hundreds of amendments to be offered, that's where it got its name. They'll just be voting back to back late into tomorrow night, probably. Now, the reconciliation measure is being used because it is technically a reconsideration of the budget and allows for it to be amended and passed with only 51 votes, avoiding the 60-vote threshold that is required to consider a bill, to take up a bill, or to close debate. So Republicans are planning on offering a number of amendments, including measures on the sanctity of human life. Joining me now to talk about all of this is U.S. Senator Roger Wicker of Mississippi. He serves on the Senate Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation, and is also the author of a number of these pro-life bills. Senator, welcome back to the program.
Tony, good to be with you. There's a lot at stake this week.
There's a lot at stake in general. Not just this week. I think for the next year, 2 years, there's a lot at stake.
Right.
But you're absolutely right with this budget reconciliation bill. But before we get into that, I know you watched the president at the prayer breakfast this morning. His remarks were very short. What were your thoughts?
It's a good thing to have every year, and 60 straight years from Eisenhower now through Biden. The president has always shown up, regardless of party. I think there was a little more of a partisan tone to his remarks, but I wasn't nearly as upset with that as with what he's been doing with all these executive orders and with the $2 trillion he's trying to spend this week.
Well, I mean, but actually in his remarks this morning, he talked about we'll be judged not by our words, but our works as well. And when he said that, I was thinking about exactly what you just mentioned, his executive orders, which, it's amazing to me how the media just attacked Donald Trump. In his first week, he had 4 executive orders. Joe Biden had 24. He has already, I think, surpassed what Donald Trump had in his first 100 days. He had 36 executive orders. And most of these are undoing everything that Trump did and what a majority of Americans support. For instance, something you've been involved in, you have a bill in the Senate, No Taxpayer Funding of Abortion bill. What he did by executive order is forced all Americans to become partners with the global abortion industry through repealing the Mexico City executive order.
Yes, that's the Mexico City provision. And if you ever really wonder if there's a difference between the two parties, when a Republican president takes office, we reinstate the Mexico City policy, which basically says, regardless of whether you're pro-life or pro-choice, the American taxpayer doesn't have to have his or her tax money spent funding organizations internationally that promote abortion and provide abortions. And it's been a pretty clear difference down through the decades between Republicans and Democrats, and this is what you get when you elect a Democrat like Barack Obama or Joe Biden.
Well, Senator Wicker, they're not drawing the line just with international promotion of abortion. They're wanting to do it here as well by eliminating the Hyde Amendment.
That's right, and the Hyde Amendment is something that Republicans and Democrats have been able to agree on year in and year out. Even when Nancy Pelosi was Speaker beforehand, for 40 years we've had, under Democratic presidents and Republican presidents, we have had the Hyde Amendment, which says domestically taxpayer money isn't spent to provide abortions. And just when you think you've seen it all, here comes Joe Biden as the new Democratic president and says we need to overturn 40 years of bipartisan consensus that regardless of how you feel about the sanctity of life, you shouldn't force American taxpayers like Tony Perkins and Roger Wicker, who are pro-life, to spend their money paying for abortions that take a human life. That's something that if Joe Biden succeeds and the Democratic majorities in the House and Senate succeed in changing that, it will be a sea change in consensus that we've had for a long, long time.
It will. And what's interesting, and we've talked about it here on this program, is Joe Biden, when he was a senator, supported the Hyde Amendment. It shows you where the Democratic Party has gone on this issue. I mean, you're from Mississippi, I'm from
Tony,
Louisiana. Most of the Democrats that I served with when I was in office back in the state legislature were pro-life. That's changed. The party is driving it. There is a polarization that's taking place, and I think the parties are driving a lot of it.
And it's taken place at a time when more and more Americans are becoming pro-life.
You're absolutely right.
Because more and more Americans pay attention to the science, to the sonograms. For most grandparents, and I'm a grandparent 7 times now, and with another on the way, that the first picture of their grandchild is the sonogram picture, which shows.
But wait a minute, Senator.
A human form and the beating heart.
But Senator, we're told the Democrats are the party of science.
That's right. That's right. There's, I coined a phrase which didn't get very far. Plano Democrats, pro-life in name only. You have a few that run as Democrats. Casey from Pennsylvania. Even Harry Reid used to tell me he's pro-life. He's personally pro-life.
Right.
But that when it comes down to a vote, they are lockstep.
Yeah. Even more so
Not
today.
only pro-abortion, but also pro-taxpayer funding of abortion.
Right.
And honestly, we've got some legislation. I want to make the Hyde Amendment permanent, and I will offer that again. But we've got some legislation that says, if the child is born alive, they have a right to continue. Even though an abortion was attempted,
right.
The child was born alive anyway. They have a right to stay alive. And we remember how horrified America was when Virginia Governor Northam said the child should be kept comfortable, but that's it. It's amazing that the Democrats have moved farther and farther away from pro-life when more and more Americans are willing to say they are pro-life.
Right. Well, we just saw
the baby and the heart beating in the womb.
Right. And of course, back to your point on the funding of it, just 2 weeks ago, there was actually it was last week. 55% of Democrats opposed the funding for foreign abortion. So clearly, the Democratic leadership is moving way beyond even where their own party is on this issue. Now, coming up on this VoteARama, it's going to be taking place today and tomorrow. You mentioned the Born Alive bill. There's most likely going to be a vote on that.
I hope we get a vote on that, and we're entitled to a vote on that. We will, at some point in the wee hours of some morning, we will get exhausted and yield back the time. But I hope before that occurs, we'll get a vote.
Well, it's going to be interesting.
Senator Sass's legislation, which protects children who survive attempted abortions.
Right. But it's going to be very interesting with this divided Senate, 50-50, the vice president casting the deciding vote. Everybody's going to have to be there for these votes.
True, and it could all have been avoided. The new president's finest hour turns out to have been his first hour, where he made a speech about unity and working together. There's been no hint of that since the inaugural address. But Republicans have gone to the new president to propose a compromise that doesn't spend nearly as much money and to address this pandemic in the way we addressed it almost unanimously with Democrats and Republicans on 5 occasions during the last year of the Trump administration. On 5 occasions, Republicans and Democrats got together, the last time being in December, and agreed on something bipartisan. But this new president, who is said that bipartisanship will be his byword, is the first example during the pandemic of basically saying, take it or leave it.
I think he said
$1.9 trillion, take it or leave it, in spite of the fact that the CBO came out this week, Tony, and said the economy is doing far better than anyone expected. By mid-year, this year, GDP will be back where it was pre-pandemic.
Yeah. And I don't think he said that was going to be his byword. I think he said goodbye to the word bipartisan. Senator, great to have you on. Thanks so much for joining us today.
You bet.